Hi everyone, welcome to Sunya IS. In this class, we are starting the new part of your Medieval Indian History series. Today, we will discuss the lecture number 6. This is your topic wise series for 6 to 12th NCRT. And today, we will discuss the new part of your Medieval India, that is the Bhakti and Sufi movement. So, we'll start from the Bhakti movement in the Medieval India and then we will discuss Sufism. So, you need to have this clarity in mind that Bhakti movement started before Sufism in India. We started from Bhakti. Okay, so Bhakti will be learned first by us. We will see the rise and spread of Bhakti movement in India. Then we will discuss Sufism. Okay, then we'll see how Sufism got developed. Okay, so you will see that initially when Bhakti movement got started, it was in a very dormant stage. But when Sufism entered in the India, then bhakti became very active and there was a comeback, okay, which you will see by some of the important saints like Shankara, Ramanuja and some other saints came, and then bhakti movement revived again in a more active form, you can say. Okay, then Ramanand, Kabir, Guru Nanak, all these teachers were there, and we need to learn about all of them. They all are important. Then bhakti movement in Bengal is important, in Maharashtra is important, because you need to see that how bhakti movement was going in different parts, okay, in different regions. And we also need to discuss the importance of bhakti movement, like what it gave us, okay, what kind of developments were there because of bhakti movement in the society. Okay, so when we discuss the background, let's understand that it was already there in India since the ancient times. Around 6th century, we saw the rise of this new devotional trend. Okay, so the devotional idea was just to cut the middlemen like priests, brahmins, so many elaborated rituals, to cut it out. People wanted an easy way, a new way through which they could connect to the god. Okay, so the background is that the bhakti cult emerged in Tamil Nadu. Okay, it emerged in Tamil Nadu during the 7th and 8th century, and the Shaivit Nayanars and Vaishnavit Alvars used to be there. Okay, so initially it started with Alvars and Nayanars. There was no clash between them. It was just that Nayanars used to worship Shiva and Alvars, Vaishnavit Alvars used to worship Vishnu, okay, or Krishna. So they preached the Bhakti cult under Pallavas and Pandyas and Cholas of the South Indian dynasties. And here, when the medieval time came, the Bhakti movement became more active. It was the direct result of the influence of the spread of Islam in India. Okay, distinctive characteristics of Islam were there. Monotheism, or the belief in one God, came. Equality and brotherhood of man, rejection of rituals, and class divisions also, they were there. So, when we talk about Sufism, it was a liberal reform movement within Islam. Okay, so why it is liberal? It is the liberal arm of Islam because in Islam, I told you that Islam is more on the strict side. Okay, it is more strict, and that's why the issues are there. Now, people who wanted some easy ways in Islam itself, they started following Sufism. So, how Sufism got started? The origin is from the Persia, and the spread happened into India in the 11th century when so many emperors started patronizing the saints. If you remember, Kutubuddin Aibak, he made the Qutub Minar. Why? On the name of Khwaja Kutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. So he was a Sufi sant, right? Sufi saint. So now Sufi saints, the first Sufi saint was the Sheikh Ismail of Lahore, who was there in India. Then Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti also was there, the most famous of the Sufi saints of India, who settled in Ajmer, and that's why in Ajmer still people visit this, area of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. And then they started the Chishti Silsila also, which is a kind of a sect which they started, so that if you want to join Chishti Silsila, then you are following the ideas of this particular Sufi saint. Okay, with this idea they started. His disciples are called Sufis of the Chishti order. And then we had the Bahuddin Zakaria also. He came under the influence of Shihabuddin Suharwardi, and Suharwardi is a silsila, again Suharwardi silsila. It is his branch of Sufi saint who was known as the, who were known as the Sufis of Suharwardi order. Then we had Nizamuddin Aulia also. There is the Nizamuddin Dargah, which is very popular in Delhi, and every year they celebrate Vasant Panchami also in this particular, Dargah. So it belonged to the Chishti order again. So we had these all orders, and these belief systems got rise. Now when we talk about the belief of Sufism, it stressed the elements of love and devotion. So this is the new thing now, like combining love with devotion. It was something new. Why? See, before devotion, the idea of rituals, elaborated traditions, and working a lot, the penance, the level of sacrifice which was needed to get God, to get your wishes fulfilled, to reach the path of salvation, it was hard, right? Now people wanted a new way, so they understood that it's all about your inner purity, your like you like the kind of devotion which you have. Okay, that's more important. But now love also got added. Why love? See, love is the best and most powerful energy. You'll see that, for example, a young boy, okay, who is very irresponsible, okay, indisciplined, can't wake up on time, can't go college on time, and have nothing to, be very well in life. If he starts loving a girl, just for example, in that situation, that boy will wake up early in the morning just to talk or just to see that girl. Why? Because of the power of love. Love is so powerful. The affection, that's so powerful, right? You must have seen that people do so much out of their way, they go out of their way just to achieve something in love, right? When they love someone, they sacrifice so many things, and they try everything to make the other person happy. They just want to see that person, they just want to spend some time with that particular person. It's their love, it's their feeling, right? So this is a very strong feeling, and if this strong feeling will be combined with devotion, that will be the great level of achievement for the path of salvation, right? Because then you just don't have the devotion for God, you really love God, you have the feelings for God, that you can do anything for God. You can wake up at any time, you can stay for long, and you can do whatever it takes for God. So that level of sacrifice, that level of patience comes in love only. Okay, patience will be increased in love. Look at the married people, they have a lot of patience because they have the habit of listening, talking, and going through so many things on daily basis, that they have increased their patience level. Why? Because this is just because of the love, just because they want to stay with each other, just because they want to spend their life with each other. Let's just say, in Hindi we say nibhana, रिश्ता निभाने की चीज़ है, निभाने वाला होना चाहिए कोई. So निभाना बहुत मुश्किल है. It's very easy to break the relationship, but it's very very hard to make it work, to make it sustain, to to sustain it for a longer time, right? That's why they started mixing this emotion of love and devotion. So it, as effective means of realization of God came, it is a new mean now, it became the new trend now. So they believed that the service to humanity was very tantamount, is equivalent to the service to God. Okay, and they considered self discipline as an essential condition to gain knowledge of God. Now, how it differed from Orthodox Muslims? Understand that the old traditions, like traditional, Islam, the way they used to follow, they had more discussion on their external conducts. Okay, they used to talk about their external things, like you need to go for namaz, you need to do these things, you need to then do that. So many new things, so many new points were always there. So Sufis lay stress on inner purity. They don't talk about the external conduct, like what you are doing and showing to the world, but what you are from inside is more important. Even there is a a very famous story. It's like an example, you can say, that once there was a Sufi saint. He used to live in a small hut, okay, kutia, and in that small hut or kutia he used to live, and then he was very very popular. So once there was a very rich man who came to visit that Sufi saint. He wanted to see, and when he wanted to see him, he visited that hut of that Sufi saint. So when he entered inside the hut, he said that you are so popular, Baba. You are so popular saint. And you're living in such a miserable life. You don't have furnitures, you don't even have a bed, you don't have anything. You don't have, any kind of support for the life. No leisure, no comfort. Why? Why you are just, living like this? You're so famous. You could achieve and ask for anything. So the reply from the saint came that yes, I don't have furniture. I don't have anything here. That's right. But where is your furniture? Tell me, rich man, you are so handsome, so nice. You are here to see me. Tell me, when you came here, why didn't you bring your own furniture and things, your belongings, and so many other materials which you need for your life, all those comfortable things? You just came here empty handed. Why so? Then the man replied that it's because I'm just a visitor here. This is not my house. I'm not here for, to live permanently here. I just came to visit you. I'm just a visitor. And that's why I have not carried all those things with me. So Sufi saint replied that yes, I'm also a visitor only. Right? I'm here to visit this world. I just want to experience it. See new people, meet new people, see new things, experience new things. So, to get that experience, I'm here in this world. I'm like a visitor. I won't be here for permanently. I will be there with the God. I know that ultimately I'll be there with God only. I'm not living here forever. So, that's why it's not important that I, do anything like that. So Sufis, they lay stress on inner purity, while Orthodox Muslim, they emphasize on external conduct. Fine. Now, while the Orthodox believe in blind observation of rituals, the Sufis, they consider love and devotion as the only means of attaining salvation. What they consider? Please write this point. This is important. While the Orthodox believe, fine, I hope you have written this. Okay. So while Orthodox believe, they always had to go according to the blind observance of rituals, and the Sufis, they consider love and devotion as the only means of attaining salvation. Now, according to them, one must have the guidance of peer or guru. Now, what is peer or guru? Understand? Let's say you have some problem. Okay, you are suffering. Maybe there is any illness or something like that. God forbid, God forbid if it happens. And if you try taking medicines on your own at any time, wherever you want, so what will happen to you? You'll say that, okay, if a surgery is needed, I'll do my own surgery. I know how to do it. What will happen? It will make your condition worse, right? So, for a patient, okay, for a sufferer, he needs the guidance of a doctor, right medications, right doses, on right time. Okay, that's needed. So, because it's needed on right time, that's why it's very, very important that you have the right guidance, right dose of guidance, at right time in your life also, because in life also we are a sufferer, right? We all are suffering. The pain is always increasing with day, with time, with years. You'll feel that the past, the childhood or the past life always had something better. And the health condition, if you just compare, you'll grow up, and the way you grow older, you'll get weaker. The body gets weak. Okay, the strength, you lose the strength also. So all these things, happen. According to them, one must have the guidance of a peer or a guru. Like patient needs a doctor, similarly a person needs a peer or a baba, without which spiritual development is impossible. Otherwise you'll just follow things the way you want. You will just do whatever you like, but you'll never know that if it is correct or not, if I should follow this or not, if this is just the right thing which I need to do or not. You'll never understand. So to have that right understanding, it's important that follow the guidance of peer. Ideas, they emphasized by Sufism, if we talk, spirit of tolerance is very important. Spirit of tolerance, meditation, good actions, repentance for sins, performance of prayers, pilgrimages, fasting, charity, and suppression of passion by ascetic practices. All these ideas were emphasized. So, all these things, you see, they are like the way of life. It's very easy to follow. There are no difficult set of rules here, right? So, tolerance, like to be tolerance means what? Respect other religions also. Meditation is calming your own self, calm down your mind. Good actions, do good things. And if you have done something, if you committed any crime, any sin, anything, then you should have the repentance. Okay, the repentance is important, the realization is important. Performance of prayers, pilgrimages, fasting, charity, suppression of passions. What is the suppression of passion? Don't do anything with the act of passion just because man kar raha hai. That's very wrong, because sometimes with the passion you do the wrong things. Maybe you feel it right at that particular point, but later you realize that I committed a sin. It was not right. Because if we will move according to the passion, like the way we, feel like doing, then we'll always do the wrong thing. Right? Why religion is important? Why it is important in society? Understand? There are so many rules, regulations, a complete constitution is there. But still, people might not follow the rules and regulations. They might break the red light. Okay? They might break the signal, but they'll not break the rules made by the God. They will always have this fear in mind that if I commit this thing, if I do this, then there will be a problem in my life. I should not do anything wrong with anyone. So these things became very important. Now, how Sufi movement and Bhakti movement, they came closer. See, both of them had a very similar tone, which was the tone of tolerance. That's why it is important. So both these movements, they gained prominence parallelly, and both of these movements, they were based on the doctrine of love and selfless devotion, and thus they contributed a great deal to bringing the two communities closer together. Next important thing is that in the Bhakti movement, Sankara was there. Okay, so Sankara was in 9th century. He was born in Kaladi in Kerala, and he started Hindu revivalist movement, giving a new orientation to Hinduism. So from Sankaracharya, he is also known as Sankaracharya, a new belief came, and his doctrine was known as Advaita or monoism. So this is also known as Advaitavad. Okay, so just to understand this, let me ask you a question. If I say that, can you tell me the meaning of God? What is God for you? Tell me. What will be the answer? If I just ask you, what do you believe in God? So you may say yes or no, first of all. If you believe, then what is God according to you? If somebody says that no, I don't believe, then for God, for him or her, God is nothing. No one. Okay, nothing. So that will have no value. But if somebody believes in God, he will say no, God is everything, God is everywhere. Somebody will say that God is like energy. Somebody could say that no, God is like universe. The entire universe is God. Somebody will say not just this universe, but the entire world, the entire system is all about God only. So sometimes you may say that people will say, no, I feel that God is nature. Aham Brahmasmi, God is inside me, I am God. I have God inside me also. Then there can be, many other things, like somebody will say gods are on our actions, like what we do, even if you're thinking right, but if you're committing crimes, then that's wrong. So there are many examples, many ways, thousands of definition. But if I ask you to give me one single definition of God, so is it possible? No. We have so many religions, we have so many ideologies, we have so many uh, big religious preachers and teachers. But if they all will come and sit together at a place, and if they will try to, explain anything about God, even then they won't be able to do so. It will be very hard for them. Why? It is because ultimately, when we talk about God, when we talk about the actions of God, you'll see that people, they don't understand a small thing, that so much of educated gyani, babas, gurus, even if they come and sit together, they'll not be able to give us a single definition of God. They can't give us the meaning. So there is no single definition. It is said, according to the Advaitavad, that as there is no single definition, that's why it's not possible. Okay? It's not possible to define the God. So God is not having any single quality which you can define and say that this is the meaning of God. So this gave the idea of Nirgun Brahman. Okay? But opposite of this is Vishishtavad. Opposite of Advaitvad is Vishishtavad, which is about Sagun Brahman. Which says that God is with attributes. How can you say that nobody can define? You can see here so many definitions I have written, and even you can write more definitions if you want. You can think of so many new things, so many new ideas. So how can you say that God is something which you can't define? We can define, we can even do idol worship. If God is everywhere, then God is inside that idol also. If somebody wants to do the idol worship, if they see God in that thing, then what's wrong? Let them do it. Let them enjoy it whatever they want, the way they want it. Okay? Don't interfere. Don't interfere in anything just because you feel like doing it. No. It should not be like that. It should never be like that. So all these ideas came up. Okay? So now he also advocated Prabhatti Marga, or path of self surrender to God. It is very important. Okay, this is very important. Basically, the Advaitavad, which came here, it gave the doctrine which is opposite of Vishishtavad, which Vishishtvaita, Vishishtavad, in any way you can write. Okay, as it is a Sanskrit term, so sometimes Sanskrit and Hindi terms can be spelled in English differently. So let's begin with Shankara again. Shankara, when in 9th century, he was born in Kaladi in Kerala, and he started the Hindu revivalist movement, giving a new orientation to Hinduism. And his doctrine was the Advaita doctrine or monoism, which faced a reaction against the Advaita concept of Nirgun Brahman. Okay, which is God without attributes. Okay, with the emergence of the new idea of Sagun Brahman, which is God with attributes. Okay, so Sankara gave the idea of Advaitavad, Nirgun Brahman. But Ramanuj, who came later, gave the idea of Vishishtavad, Sagun Brahman, God with attributes. In 12th century, Ramanuj gave this new idea. He was born in Sirinpurumbudur near modern Chennai, and he preached Vishishtavad. According to him, God is Sagun Brahman, and God, soul, matter, they all are real. They all are right. Okay, so this preaching came. Now, he also advocated Prabhatti Marga. Ramanuj gave the idea path of self surrender to God. He invited so many people downtrodden to Vaishnavism, and people started following him. Then one more new teacher came, Madhava. Madhava came in 13th century from Kannada region, and he propagated the idea of Dvaita or dualism. He says that don't go for Advaitavad or Vishishtavad. Let's mix them both and have a middle path, which is Dvaitavad or dualism or Jivatma and Paramatma. So, according to his philosophy, the world is not an illusion but a reality. He said that God, soul, matter, they all are unique in nature. Okay, and Nimbarka or Vallabhacharya was there. They, these preachers of Vaishnavid Bhakti in the Telangana region, they preached all these ideas. And Surdas was the disciple of Vallabhacharya, and he popularized Krishna cult in North India. Surdas is also very, very important. Okay, like Nimbarka Vallabhacharya, he was the preacher of Vaishnavit Bhakti. Surdas was also popularizing the Vaishnavit Bhakti only. Basically, Vishnu and Krishna are same. Okay, so Krishna cult in North India got revived with Surdas. Okay, Surdas, he could not see, but he used to write poems and so many things related to the Krishna. All those poems are very, very popular even today. Okay, now Mirabai, a great devotee of Krishna, and she became popular in Rajasthan for her bhajans. And as you will learn more about Mirabai. She came from a royal house. She was the daughter-in-law of a very royal household family, but she left everything. She just wanted to go into the devotion and follow that path. Tulsidas, a worshipper of Rama, and composed the famous Ramacharita the Hindi version of Ramayana. That's very, very important. So Tulsidas is again popular, who was the worshipper of Rama, and he started a new, revival cult in the Rama Bhakti. Okay, so Ramcharitmanas is composed by Tulsidas, which is the Hindi version of Ramayana. Then we saw the development of new, gurus according to the new cultures with the modern time. So Ramanand, Kabir, Guru Nanak, all these, preachers came. Basically, Ramanuj was the teacher of Ramanand, and Ramanand, got Kabir as disciple, and Kabir's disciple was Nanak, Guru Nanak. Okay, so 14th to 15th centuries, you will see these three important leaders growing the Bhakti movement. Okay, so they were not linked with any particular religious creed, and they did not believe in rituals and ceremonies at all. They condemned the polytheism, and they believed in one God. They also denounced all forms of idolatry. They said no idol worship should be there. Why you worship idol? The God is so big, the energy is so high that it's impossible to keep that energy in just one small stone or an idol. It's impossible. So you should never think of making these idols. So they strongly believed in bhakti as the only means of salvation, and they also emphasized the fundamental unity of all religions. Then Ramanand was born at Allahabad and was originally follower of Ramanuj. Later he founded his own sect and preached his principles in Hindi at Banaras and Agra. He was a worshipper of Rama. Okay, so very, very important. Now, his contributions to Bhakti movement are very important. He opposed the caste system and he chose his disciples from all sections of society, disregarding caste. His disciples were Kabir, a Muslim weaver, Raidas, a cobbler, Sena, a barber, Sadhan, a butcher, Dhanna, a jat farmer, Narahari, a goldsmith, and Pipa, a Rajput prince. So you can see all the different types of people coming from different communities, caste, and class. They came here. They wanted to be with this teacher because they were connected with this guru. Okay, so that's why his contribution is very, very high. Every section of society followed him. So that's why Ramanuj is very important for us. Okay, so basically, Ramanuj, I told you, Ramanuj gave the idea of Vishishtavad, okay, idea of Saguna Brahman, and Ramanuj followers was Ramanand. So Ramanand, he was the worshipper of Rama, and Ramanand gave this idea which was opposing caste system. Ramanand chose disciples from all the sections, and that's why he had so many followers coming from different sections. When we talk about Kabir, most famous and important disciple of Ramanand, he was born near Banaras to a Brahman widow. But he was left by that Brahman widow, and then he was grown up in a family. He was brought up in a Muslim family. So as he was brought up by a Muslim couple who were weavers by profession, so that's why he learnt about both the religions, Hinduism and Muslim. And Kabir's objection was to reconcile Hindu and Muslims, and it was to establish harmony between both these two religions. So he denounced idolatry and rituals and laid a great emphasis on equality of men before God. He described Hindus and Muslims as pots of the same clay. He said that you why to fight on, on the basis of religion? You guys are same. Okay, there is no difference at all. Fine, he regarded devotion to God as an effective means of salvation and urged that to achieve this, one must have a pure heart, free from cruelty, dishonesty, hypocrisy, and insincerity. His followers are called Kabir Panthis. Very important. Kabir Panthis. Okay. Then Guru Nanak came. He was the founder of Sikh religion and a disciple of Kabir. He was born in Talwandi near Lahore, and he dedicated his life to establish harmony between Hindus and Muslims. He denounced caste distinction and rituals like bathing in holy rivers, and he exhorted people to give up selfishness, falsehood, and hypocrisy. Okay, to lead a life of truth, honesty, and kindness. His famous saying was, "Abide pure amidst the impurities of the world," was one. Okay, he used to say that be very pure and don't get into the impurities of world. If you will be good, everybody will be good with you. आप खुद अच्छे हो तो सब आपके साथ अच्छे रहेंगे. So these were the ideas. Even today, when I'm recording this lecture, we have Guru Nanak Jayanti today, right? It is also celebrated as the Dev Diwali, so very popular. Then his followers were known as Sikhs, right? Now, Chaitanya was the reformer of Bengal who popularized the Krishna cult. He proclaimed the universal brotherhood of man and condemned all the distinctions based on the religion and caste, emphasized love and peace, showed great sympathy to the suffering of other people. They believed that through love and devotion, song, dance, devotees can feel the presence of God. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is important. He was from Bengal. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it was asked in prelims also. In UPSC prelims, we have a question in PYQ. So that's why it's important. So that's why, he accepted the disciples from all classes and castes again. And his teachings are very, very important, like the idea of having no caste distinctions at all, equality, brotherhood, tolerance, all these things were there. In Maharashtra, we had Gyanadev, the founder of Bhakti movement in Maharashtra in 13th century. He was called the Maharashtra Dharma. Okay, it was basically called the Maharashtra Dharma, which got started by him. He wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, also known as Gyaneshwari. Then Namadev came. He opposed the idol worship and priestly domination and the caste system. Then Eknath came in 16th century. He opposed the caste distinction and sympathetic towards the lower caste. He always wanted people to have sympathy for the lower caste people. You will see that there is a common thing in Maharashtra, that all these gurus and all these revolutions, they used to emphasize that there should be the upliftment of the lower caste. They will always talk about the equality among all the castes. Okay, so they will be against the caste system every time. He also composed many lyrics. Eknath composed lyrics, and his bhajans and kirtans were very, very famous. Then one more famous saint was there, Tukaram, Bhakti saint of Maharashtra, and he was the contemporary of Shivaji. He created the background of Maratha nationalism, which was later utilized by the nationalist leaders during the freedom struggle of India. Okay, then he also composed all the things related to the idea of god, and yes, these literatures got developed, the local literatures were going fine. And Tukaram also opposed the all types of social distinctions. He wanted equality. Okay, so what is the importance of bhakti movement? What bhakti movement gave us? How society got developed and transformed due to bhakti movement? That's very, very important. Okay, so it provided an impetus for the development of regional languages. Why? See, these new saints, they always had to talk in simple language. Okay, simple regional language, so that they could attract the masses. And to attract the masses, they used to compose the songs, bhajans, everything in the regional language. So the development of regional literature happened, such as Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, Kannada, and various preachers. They used to speak and they used to write in the regional language to have some more connection with masses. Okay, so through these languages, they made direct appeal to the masses. Then Bhakti saints, they condemned the caste system. The lower classes were raised to a position of great importance. The importance of women in society was also increased. Bhakti movement gave equal importance to them. Bhakti movement gave to the people a simple religion without complicated rituals at all, and the new idea of a life of charity and service to fellow people developed. So it was a great development. Okay, it was something new for everyone, that there should be charity, there should be good ideas, new ways of life, new developments, right? So ultimately all these things flourished in the society. They brought equality in the society, and this was a great achievement of bhakti and Sufi movement in India. Fine. So I have discussed everything with you. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And I'll be coming live daily at 9 p.m. Okay, so I'll be giving you the new details of the next lectures, the upcoming lectures and classes very soon. We will discuss them all. We will have it very soon. And if in case you have any doubts, if any queries are there, please do let me know in the comment section, and try to cover everything from Telegram also. Those who are not there on Telegram, let me just tell you that you need to fill a form in the description box, which is there in this YouTube video. Or otherwise what you can do is just search on Telegram NCRT with Sunya IS, and you'll get the Telegram channel. There we have made a group also. You can join that group also, and you'll enjoy everything. Okay, so we have completed Delhi Sultanate, we have completed Bhakti movement. In the next class, we will start discussion on Mughals. Okay, and those of you having any doubts, they can always reach out to me in the comment box. Okay, let me know in case there is any problem, any issue you are going through, and I'll be there for you. And try to revise it all. The points which I have highlighted in the lecture, they are the keywords. Okay, they are the most important points, and they are important for your prelims. That's why I have highlight it. So whatever I highlight in the lecture, make a flowchart of it, try to keep it in your mind and revise it again and again. Learning is important, okay? Like in school days you used to learn, okay? You'd never considered only listening and listening. Before the exam you used to sit and learn things, right? So same habit you need to develop again, okay? Learning is important. Fine. So I hope guys you enjoyed the session very well. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for watching. See you then. Take care. Bye bye.